I've made such a big deal about Texas finally joining the 20th century in 1920. We ought to probably do a snapshot of what the state looks like in the 1920s. Well, for starters, it's the fifth largest state in the Union during this decade. About 5.8 million people call Texas home, but that represents a 25% increase during that decade. So the 1920s are a growth decade in Texas. Another unusual trend, or certainly new to Texas, 41% of that population live in towns of greater than 2,000 people. So Texans are moving to town in the 1920s. They're moving off of their isolated farms and ranchsteads and having a townhouse. Now, they still may have ranches and farms, but now they have vehicles, cars, they can take them to and from. All right. Even so, this trend towards moving to town represents a 33% increase in moving to town, people living in towns. But what about cities? Well, we still got the big five cities that have emerged in the early 1900s. The largest city in the state, Houston, with 300,000 people. Dallas has about 260,000 people, just a little more than 250,000. San Antonio has 232,000 people. And then Fort Worth comes in with 164,000 people. The other cities, we're talking about places like Galveston and El Paso at this point. But the 1920s are a disaster to the Texas cotton industry. Things were looking so good in 1919. Soldiers are coming back from World War I. Cotton is where the money is. 42 cents a pound in 1920. Everything is looking great. So everybody plants cotton. When everybody plants cotton, the price collapses. And in fact, the price collapses to just 10 cents a pound a year later. The acreage growing cotton doubles in the 1920s, but the price always remains soft. As a result, in Texas, by 1930, fully 60% of farmers are tenant farmers. They don't even farm their own dirt. There's another interesting demographic trend. The Revolution of 1910 essentially became the great generator of Texas's awesome Tejano population today. Here's how it goes. There's so many refugees that come across during the course of those conflicts that by 1930, Tejanos, Mexican Americans, Americans of Mexican origin represent more than 12% of the overall state population. That's vast. That's big. That's larger than it's ever been. There's about 700,000 that would be citizens of Mexican origin by 1930. Of these, 40% are foreign born. Now, what did this Tejano population do? They grew cotton. Remember, cotton expands during the 1920s. These are the guys that come and fuel that cotton expansion. But they also are extremely involved in other agricultural labor, especially with the increase in irrigated land in the Rio Grande Valley and the lower Rio Grande Valley. This is a migrant population. They will move from farm to farm, field to field, season to season. And so that is essentially what brings the great Tejano population increase into Texas right after World War I and all the way through the 1920s. What else happens in the 1920s? Oil. That is a recurring theme. There's oil in the 1900s, there's oil in the 19-teens, and there's oil in the 1920s. There is a lot of oil going on, but right at the end of that decade, 1930, there's a fellow by the name of Marion Dad Joyner that discovers an oil field near Henderson, Texas, in northeast Texas, that is the largest pool of oil on Earth. And that will really change the entire landscape of Texas yet again.